Racing comes down to those moments when drivers have milliseconds to make decisions that separate victory from disaster. Some stick to the rulebook, others rewrite it entirely. From last lap desperation moves to calculated championship mathematics, these are the moments when conventional racing wisdom gets thrown out of the window. So here are the racing moments that proved intelligence beats raw speed. Picture this, you're down 2 points with 1 lap to go, facing elimination from NASCAR's championship hunt if you can't overtake 2 cars. Most drivers would accept defeat, but not Ross Chastain. At Martinsville 2022, while everyone else hit the brakes entering turns 3 and 4, Chastain floored it. He pinned his Chevrolet against the outside wall and held on for dear life as his car became a 200-mile-per-hour missile scraping concrete. In 18 seconds, he obliterated the track record and passed 5 stunned competitors who probably thought they were witnessing a crash in slow motion. The move was so absurd that Chastain later admitted he learnt it playing NASCAR 2005 on GameCube as a kid. Video game logic made real with actual consequences. His car ground against the wall, sparks flying, while he somehow maintained control without a steering wheel because the G-forces had ripped it from his hands. The internet exploded. Over 100 million views, even Formula 1 champions were losing their minds. NASCAR immediately banned the move afterward, knowing nobody could ever top it. They literally had to change the rule book because one man refused to lift his foot off the gas when physics said he should. The ultimate hold my beer moment in motorsports history.
Oh my goodness, I have never...
That was wild, man. That was wild.
Ross Chastain used the wall all the way around this racetrack to race his way into the championship 4.
He went from 10th to 5th place.
Sometimes the greatest overtakes happen because someone's too proud to play defense. Catalunya 2009 was Jorge Lorenzo learning that lesson the hard way against the master himself, Valentino Rossi. Picture the scene, 2 Yamaha teammates locked in a season-defining battle, with Lorenzo leading into the final corner of an absolutely electric race. The 22-year-old Spaniard had the win in his pocket until Rossy pulled off one of the most audacious last corner moves in MotoGP history. Here's the kicker. Lorenzo saw it coming. He knew Rossy had pulled similar stunts before, knew the Italian was lethal under braking. But Lorenzo was too stubborn, too confident in his racing line to slam the door shut. He later admitted he was too arrogant to properly defend, essentially gifting Rossy the opening for that legendary dive bomb. The move didn't just steal a victory, it flipped the entire championship. Rossy went on a tear after Catalunya, winning 4 more races, while Lorenzo managed just 2. What started as a tight title fight became a 45-point demolition job. Years later, Lorenzo could only shake his head at his younger self's pride. Sometimes experience trumps speed, and sometimes the veteran's cunning beats the young gun's raw talent. Rossi knew exactly when to strike.
We ride with Valentino Rossi. Lorenzo now into turn 13. And Rossi's invented something in the final corner, but Lorenzo gets close to the back, and Rossi has beaten him. What a motorcycle race! What a Grand Prix!
Monaco's legendary tunnel nearly became the site of motorsport's worst nightmare in 2024, and only superhuman reflexes prevented absolute catastrophe. Isaac Hadjar is flying through Formula 2 qualifying at full attack mode, approaching the tunnel entrance at ridiculous speed. What he doesn't know is that Ritomo Miata's car has basically died ahead, crawling along the right barrier like a sitting duck. The problem? Monaco's tunnel creates a complete blind spot. You literally cannot see what's coming until it's too late. Hadjar comes screaming around the corner, and suddenly there's Miata's car moving at maybe 30 miles per hour while Hadjar's doing 150 plus. In that split second, physics says this ends in disaster. Cars launched, barriers destroyed, careers over. Instead, Hadjar pulls off a reaction that defies human capability. He yanks his Campos left so violently you'd expect the car to snap in half, threading a gap that shouldn't exist between Miata and the tunnel wall. We're talking millimeters here, any less reaction time and we're looking at one of motorsport's darkest moments. Rumours have it that this was the moment that got Hadjar his F1 seat in 2025.
So he's very slowly there in the tunnel. So whether he's having some sort of reliability issue, and that's a scary place to be behind racing speed.
Goodness me.
The Nürburgring 24 hours is already chaos on 4 wheels, but Kevin Estre decided hour 6 needed an extra dose of insanity. His move on Dirk Muller didn't just change the lead, it redefined what's possible when racing gets desperate. Muller's Black Falcon Mercedes had been untouchable for 6 hours, building what looked like an unbreakable advantage. Then Estre happened. The Manthey Porsche pilot had already erased an 11-second deficit through pure aggression, but the real fireworks came on the Dottinger Ho straight. With Muller holding the racing line and seemingly safe, Estre made a decision that defied every racing manual ever written. He dropped 2 wheels onto the grass at 150 plus miles per hour, using Mother Nature as his passing lane. On the Nürburgring, where the slightest mistake sends you into the barriers at terminal velocity. The move worked. Estre threaded his 911 GT3R past the stunned Mercedes like he was overtaking on a Sunday drive, not gambling his life on a patch of German countryside. Within minutes, he turned a deficit into a 30-second lead. It's the kind of move that either makes you a legend or a cautionary tale. At the ring, there's rarely an in-between.
Gap starts to come down much quicker as he gets into the hole of the air made by the Mercedes, drifts over, 2 wheels on the grass, the pass on the grass for the lead, 3 wide under the Bilstein Bridge. That is extraordinary, absolutely incredible.
The French veteran had fresh rubber and a point to prove, staring down Scott Dixon, Spencer Pigot and Matthias Leist like they were traffic cones. What happened next broke every rule of conventional racing wisdom. Bourdais swung wide to the outside, the wrong line at Long Beach, and somehow made it stick against Dixon and Leist simultaneously. But here's where it gets absolutely mental. Mid-overtake, Bourdais suddenly switched directions like he was playing a video game. He carved back to the inside line with surgical precision, completing a triple pass that shouldn't be physically possible on a street circuit where overtaking one car is considered miraculous. The move was so outrageous that even IndyCar stewards seemed stunned. They eventually hit Bourdais with a drive-through penalty for crossing the pit exit line, probably because they needed time to process what they just witnessed.
Lijkt erop van wel. Bourdais, een tweedubbele slipstream. Nou, ga je het hier doen? 3 dik bij het aanremmen. Maar wel aan de buitenkant en pakt hem. Oh, Bourdais, dat deed je niet, jongen.
Felix D Costa turned GP3 physics into pure art at Monza, using Varnio like a human slingshot in the most unconventional way possible. Running wide at Parabolica's entrance looked like a mistake, until it became genius. D Costa deliberately stayed glued to Varnio's rear wing, using the slipstream like a turbo boost all the way down Monza's endless main straight. But this wasn't just following, this was strategic bump drafting that would make NASCAR drivers jealous. The Portuguese driver rode Varnio's wake for what felt like an eternity, timing his move to perfection. Instead of the usual GP3 overtaking struggles, D Costa threw the rulebook out and went full contact sport. The bump draft gave him the extra speed needed to complete one of the most calculated overtakes in GP3 history. It's the kind of move that proves sometimes the best racing happens when drivers stop thinking like single-seater pilots and start thinking like street racers. Pure instinct meets tactical brilliance at 180 miles per hour.
Very messy entry from D Costa, but look at him on the back of Oro Vino, giving him, well, that's bump drafting if ever I saw it. Totally bump drafting him. This is like NASCAR. Unbelievable!
Antonio Giovanati pulled off a brilliant switchback maneuver, approaching the chicane that caught his opponent completely off guard. The Italian made his initial move to the inside, drawing a defensive response, then immediately switched back to the outside line. Using the GT3 car as a strategic weapon, Giovanati positioned himself perfectly to block any counter-attack while completing his own overtaking move. His opponent was left watching as the Ferrari swept past on the outside, unable to respond to the rapid change of direction. It was pure racecraft, using deception and positioning to create an overtaking opportunity where none seemed to exist, securing the winning position.
And he's about to have a go at the Porsche, which almost trips over the Ferrari, and he's done it on the inside. Brilliant opportunistic move. Giovanazzi uses the traffic, read that beautifully, and goes through. Moves that car up into 8th place. Cracking stuff, that.
The 100th Indianapolis 500 became a masterclass in calculated risk, thanks to Alex Rossy turning fuel conservation into a winning strategy nobody saw coming. Rossy wasn't supposed to win. He was a 66-1 long shot, an F1 reject making his oval debut who'd barely seen an IndyCar before February. While Carlos Munoz and Joseph Newgarden had the raw speed, Rossi had something different, a team willing to gamble everything on one insane fuel run. Brian Herta's strategy was pure mathematics, stretched the final tank 90 miles while everyone else played it conservative. As the leaders ducked into the pits for splash and dash stops, Rossi suddenly found himself out front with nothing but vapors keeping his Honda running. The final laps were brutal. Rossi was working his clutch frantically, getting barked at over the radio to save every drop while limping around the speedway at 179 miles per hour. Embarrassingly slow for Indy standards. His car ran completely dry on the victory lap, requiring a tow to reach victory lane. It was the ultimate underdog victory. Winning motorsport's biggest race was not through superior speed, but through fuel-saving precision that turned desperation into championship gold. Sometimes the tortoise really does beat the hare.
Alexander Rossi almost rolling to a dead stop. Twin checkers are out and the rookie will win the 100th Indianapolis 500-mile race.
Sometimes the best overtakes happen before you even reach the racing line. Sebastian Vettel proved that at Shanghai 2016, turning a traffic jam into a masterclass in pit lane aggression. When the safety car hit on lap 4, everyone scrambled for the pits. But Nico Hülkenberg had other ideas. He decided to cruise down the pit entry like he was sightseeing, with Carlos Sainz's Toro Rosso content to follow behind. Meanwhile, Vettel was watching this leisurely parade unfold and thinking, absolutely not. The German had two choices: sit in traffic like a gentleman or do what Vettel does best, create chaos. And he chose chaos. Without hesitation, he dropped two wheels onto the grass and launched his Ferrari past both dawdling cars in one fluid motion. "We're free to race in the pit entry, but it looks like I was the only one to remember," Vettel said afterward with typical German directness. While everyone else treated the pit entry like a school zone, Vettel treated it like the Autobahn.
Could barely slow down in the pit lane. He's so anxious to get on with it because the speed limit, yeah, that's fair enough. Yep. The speed limit is now 50 miles. Now, I love that. That brain switched on at all times from Seth Bettle there.
After 4 hours of weather delays and 199 laps of chess moves, the 2024 Indianapolis 500 came down to one final roll of the dice between Joseph Newgarden and Pato O'Ward. O'Ward had positioned himself perfectly for glory, holding the lead as they entered the last lap with over 300,000 fans on their feet. The Mexican had the line, the momentum, and what looked like a clear path to victory. Then Newgarden reminded everyone why he's called the closer. With the checkered flag in sight and the Indiana sunset painting the sky, Newgarden made his move. He swept past O'Ward's Arrow McLaren like the young driver was standing still, timing his pass to perfection when it mattered most. No room for error, no second chances, just pure Indianapolis 500 magic distilled into one decisive moment. The overtake made Newgarden the first back-to-back Indy 500 winner in 22 years, joining an exclusive club of just 6 drivers in history. While controversy swirled around his team's earlier season issues, none of that mattered in the final moment. Sometimes, racing comes down to who wants it more when the lights are brightest, and Newgarden delivered when legends are made.
Joseph Newgarden around the outside of Pato O'Ward. This is mind-blowing. And now he's going to do it back-to-back. Joseph Newgarden is a 2-time Indy 500 winner. Oh my goodness.
Championship mathematics at Suzuka 1990 were brutally simple. If Prost didn't finish, Senna won the title, and the Brazilian made sure those numbers worked in his favour. Senna arrived at the Japanese Grand Prix knowing exactly what needed to happen. After his controversial disqualification the previous year cost him the championship, he wasn't leaving anything to chance this time. The grudge had been simmering for 12 months. Turn 1, lap 1. Prost positioned himself on the racing line as any driver would. Senna had other plans. Honda's telemetry data told the whole story. Senna kept his foot planted on the throttle and drove straight into Prost's Ferrari. No attempt to brake, no attempt to turn, just cold calculation at 180 miles per hour. Both cars were done, race over for both drivers. Championship decided in Senna's favour without completing a single lap. Senna maintained his innocence for years, claiming it was aggressive racing gone wrong. Eventually, he admitted the truth. It was deliberate retaliation for 1989. The stewards never penalised him, perhaps influenced by the previous year's controversy.
By being a racing driver means you are racing with other people. And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver.
The Sao Paulo 300 came down to one final corner, one final chance, and James Hinchcliffe refusing to settle for second place against Takuma Sato. For 299 laps, Sato had held his ground. The Japanese driver was moments away from victory on the streets of Sao Paulo, with Hinchcliffe breathing down his neck but seemingly out of options. Street circuits don't offer many overtaking opportunities, and the final turn looked like Sato's safest passage to the checkered flag. Hinchcliffe had other ideas. As they approached the last corner of the last lap, the Canadian made a decision that separated champions from also rans. Instead of accepting defeat, he drove to the inside with everything on the line. What followed was pure racing instinct. Hinchcliffe threaded his car through a gap that shouldn't have existed, pulling alongside Sato at the exact moment it mattered most. The move was perfectly timed. Too early and Sato could have responded. Too late and there wouldn't have been track left. By the time they crossed the finish line, Hinchcliffe had stolen victory from the jaws of defeat. Sometimes the best overtakes happen when there's literally nowhere left to go but forward.
Newgarden's out of the draft. Sato hangs onto it. Newgarden on the inside of Andretti. And on the inside, Hinchcliffe is on the over and under. Oh, he is in the mayor's office. James Hinchcliffe runs it to the line. Will he have enough? And he wins his second one.
Alexander Rossi found himself facing every driver's nightmare in Texas when a car spun directly ahead of him on the high-speed oval. At over 200 miles per hour, reaction time becomes everything and mistakes turn fatal. The spinning car created an instant roadblock, forcing Rossi to make split-second calculations while traveling at terminal velocity. Instead of panicking or overcorrecting, Rossi threaded his car through the chaos with surgical precision, avoiding the spinning wreckage by mere inches.
Get to the bottom. Oh, clear. Holy nice job, buddy. Nice job. Know how. Nor do I, but you did it. That's what matters.
Sebastian Vettel turned psychology into pure racing art at Barcelona 2017, dismantling Valtteri Bottas with a triple dummy move that belonged in a textbook on deception. Mercedes had deployed Bottas as their strategic weapon, keeping him out longer to hold up Vettel and buy Hamilton precious time. The plan was working perfectly until Vettel decided he had enough of playing follow the leader with a finished roadblock. Approaching turn 1, Vettel began his masterclass. First dummy to the inside, Bottas covered it, then a feint to the outside. Bottas moved again. By now, the Mercedes driver was probably wondering which way Vettel would actually go, his head spinning from the mind games. That's when Vettel struck. Having sold 2 convincing fakes, he committed to a third move back to the inside, diving down the gap with his wheels kissing the grass. Bottas, caught completely off guard by the audacity, could only watch as the Ferrari swept past.
He get a better run this time.
Well, let's see.
He's going to have to dummy him. He's going to have to pretend he's going right.
And Sebastian Vettel goes onto the grass this time. Sebastian Vettel on the inside does manage to get past.
With 3 laps to go at Indianapolis 2019, Alexander Rossi had the lead and all the momentum. Then Simon Pashino executed one perfectly timed move that decided everything. Rossi had been the fastest driver for most of the final stint, making aggressive passes and looking like he had the race under control. But Pashino had been sitting back, studying Rossi's lines and waiting for his opportunity. On lap 199, Pashino made his move into turn 3. It wasn't spectacular, just clean, decisive racing when it counted. Rossi immediately tried to counter-attack on the final lap, getting close enough to make things interesting, but never quite close enough to complete a pass. Pashino held his position through the final corners, crossing the finish line just 0.2 seconds ahead. The margin was the 7th closest in Indy 500 history, but it felt comfortable because Pashino had controlled the crucial moments. The Frenchman became the first pole sitter to win since 2009 and the first French driver to take the 500 since 1920. More importantly, he showed that sometimes winning isn't about having the fastest car, it's about making the right move at exactly the right time.
And here he comes, Lee. Might happen going to 3. Pashino had a great turn 3 last time. Simon Pashino takes the lead in the Indy 500.
Carlos Sainz turned Formula 1 strategy on its head at Singapore 2023, deliberately slowing down to help his former teammate defend against the charging Mercedes duo behind them. With 18 laps to go, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton had fresh medium tyres and were carving through the field like hot knives through butter. Russell was demolishing lap times, closing an 18-second gap with frightening speed. Sainz knew that if Russell got past Norris, his own race was over. So, the Ferrari driver made a calculated gamble that defied conventional racing wisdom. Instead of building a gap, Sainz slowed himself down to keep Norris within DRS range. He deliberately gave away 1.2 seconds of his lead to ensure Norris had the slipstream advantage heading into turn 7. The plan was mathematical precision disguised as teamwork. Norris used that DRS boost to stay ahead of Russell's advances, creating a defensive wall that protected Sainz's victory. When Russell finally got alongside Norris with 4 laps to go, the McLaren driver held firm. Russell's late crash sealed the deal, but Sainz had already won the chess match.
Carlos Sainz knows that he needs the help of Lando Norris. He has deliberately given Lando Norris DRS. Carlos Sainz, tactical brilliance. Carlos Sainz, the winner of the Singapore Grand Prix.
These moments show that winning races isn't always about having the fastest car. Sometimes it's about seeing opportunities others miss, making moves others won't attempt, or calculating risk others can't stomach. Whether it's fuel strategy, psychological warfare, or pure reaction time, the best drivers find ways to win when the odds are stacked against them. In racing, the smallest margins often produce the biggest legends. Now, this has been Racers Reverie, and we'll see you in the next one.